Well, I was a little wishy-washy because I knew you weren't going to be, but I wasn't expecting you to go hyperbolic. So that was actually pretty interesting. um,
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Agile or BS. I'm your host, Peter Saddington, with my amazing colleague, Bob Hartman from Agile for All. We love answering all of your Agile and Scrum-based questions. And today, we're talking about an interesting one, QA at the end of each sprint. So is quality assurance or UAT testing QA, is that real Agile or BS if we only have it at the end of each sprint? Bob, I'll give you the first hit.
Peter, I think this is one that's going to fall in a little bit of a gray area for me, which is I don't like it, but if they're getting everything tested and done by the end of the sprint, then I guess it's okay. Although I'm wondering what are the developers doing while the other people are doing QA testing at the end of the sprint. So obviously, I think you'll agree we want to have more continuous testing throughout the sprint. We want to make sure that things are ready throughout the sprint and not just with that race for the finish on the last day or two. If you're in a situation where you have 7 or 8 days of development followed by 2 or 3 days of testing, then that's definitely not very agile. But again, if they're meeting their sprint commitment and nobody knows any different, I guess they're sort of kind of being agile. I think they can do a lot better, but doing it just at the end of the sprint every single time is basically you're trying to race to avoid disaster. And to me, agile doesn't appear to be a race to avoid disaster. I think we have to look at doing things in a much different way. And there's lots of tools we can use to do that. But let's hear your opinion first.
I find you to be significantly more wishy-washy about this one, Bob, than I imagined. Or maybe that's just my perception of it. I just find it to be absolutely irresponsible that you would ever create a model that QA would be at the very end. And what I like to tell my clients and what I like to tell my students in class is a very simple adage. And actually, we've talked about this before, Bob. The adage is simply this: when do you want to know you're wrong? It's such a powerful mental model for anyone out there listening to have. Is when do you want to know you're wrong? Well, obviously, the idea is you want to know as soon as possible. And being an engineer developer myself, there's no way that I would want to do 2 weeks of work if we're in like an ideal Scrum cadence. There's no way that I would want to do 2 weeks of work only to find out that I'm wrong. And if we go hyperbolic for a second, I think many of our viewers can probably resonate with this, is that if you're in a traditional waterfall methodology, then you work for 9 to 12 months and then find out you're completely wrong and the client hates it and they don't like it and it needs changes here and it needs this here and this is off. It's like, for me as an engineer developer, I move to that model so quickly. When do I want to know I'm wrong? And if I find out that I'm wrong sooner, then I can correct sooner. So I might have portrayed you unfairly, Bob, as being wishy-washy about this, but I'm pretty adamant that there's no way I would ever allow a development team to test only after they're all done. There has to be incremental testing. There has to be ways that we can figure out whether this is the right function, the right feature, the right API, the right hook, the right outcome that we want, and we can test that earlier. And for those that are out there, if you're looking to do a little bit more research, I would highly suggest that you look up test-driven development, or TDD. It's a great framework for development, and it really helps your engineers create the right frameworks and models to ensure that they're testing as they go. I'll throw it back to you, Bob. Any other last thoughts?
Well, I was a little wishy-washy because I knew you weren't going to be, but I wasn't expecting you to go hyperbolic. So that was actually pretty interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think what happens when you do the testing at the end is you get into it's just mini waterfalls within sprints. And that's not good. I mean, while we're at it, why don't we throw in analysis at the start of the sprint, right? So let's just do all of it within a sprint and just keep doing that and call it Scrum. And we all know that that's not really what we want to get out of this. So it's not a good thing. On the other hand, if somebody's doing that and they're successfully completing what they said in their sprint planning, then at least that's a starting point for them. It's not an ending point, but at least they're starting down the Agile pathway. And I'd rather have them do that than do no testing every sprint and let's do development in one sprint and testing in the next. So I guess it's a matter of degrees. And for me, that's the one that really makes me just go crazy, because it's like, what happened to being done at the end of the sprint? Oh, well, coding's done. Yeah. So, right. So to me, like I said, it's a matter of degrees. We're in the middle, I guess, or the starting point of agility when we can do coding followed by testing. We're much more mature when we can actually do both in the sprints, simultaneously together with test-driven development and things like that. Even the categories. She's jumping all over me saying it's crazy.
I was breaking out of character there for a second, Bob. I love the cat. Guys, I think we're pretty much at a good point in this particular topic. I think we all agree that you want to end up figuring out whether you're wrong as soon as possible. You want to create incremental testing of frameworks or the right points in your development so that you catch things as you go. The last thing we want to do is we want to have a demo or a review at the end of a sprint and have stakeholders, have users, have internal individuals look at us and say, man, that was completely wrong, or you completely messed that up. Obviously, we're going to have a great retrospective at the end of it, but we want to have a good discipline to catch those things sooner, because we all know that when you catch things sooner, you're more contextually relative to it. You can address it and fix it faster, and the overall cost of development lowers, right? The last thing you want to do is have 2 weeks or 2 months or 8 months or 9 months of work only to find out it's all wrong, and then you have to redo everything. There's 1,000 things that I could bring up from there, but I think we're in agreement here, guys. What do you guys say? We're two guys in the Agile space. We have opinions, but you guys might have differing opinions from us. So feel free to leave a comment below or join us at agileforall.com in our forums, and you can leave us a post and let us know how you might think differently. Thanks so much for joining us in another episode of Real Agile or BS. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the Twitter sphere. See you on the flip side.